reward yourself for all the hard work and the hours and the time and the grind. Because us as business owners, it's just us a lot of times, and we have to be rewarded for the sacrifice that we actually put in to be able to serve our clients on a high level.
Well, hey, welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show. And we are continuing our series on the coaches that don't suck. Hello, Deborah. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Amanda, how are you? So great to see you here today.
I'm so excited to have you here. Now, dear listener, Deborah Angeletta is a former Wall Street trader with 30 and more years of finance experience, and is the owner of a business advisory practice. She helps business owners improve their cash flow, yay, and boost profits, woohoo, through her proven profit powerhouse blueprint, which has guided over 300 CEOs in recovering significant lost revenue. Deborah empowers entrepreneurs to gain clarity on their finances, make confident decisions, and scale their businesses for greater impact. So when Deborah and I met over LinkedIn, I had to invite her to the show because these are just a few of my favorite things. So Deborah, why don't you just take 30 seconds and catch us up on what are you working on lately, and what are you focused on?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's so great to be here with you. Thanks so much for having me on. What I'm up to right now is how we met, actually, Amanda, over LinkedIn. I'm writing a book, so I'm doing a lot of research, and that's how we connected. And it's a really interesting landscape when you talk about the financial landscape and supporting small businesses. And traditionally, we're used to having two people in our business. Now, if you're small, you're not going to have like a CFO or you're going to hire in for a finance position. Typically, people have a bookkeeper and then they have someone who does their taxes. And the work that I've been doing over the years in business advisory is that I've discovered this big gap between those two people that typically have these two resources in their business, and the gap and the hole that people are falling into, where they could get a lot more information and timely information to make better decisions to drive their business to profitability. Because what I discovered is starting to partner with these two functions that are very, very important for your business, but that doesn't complete everything, is that when it comes to having a business, you got to have a profitable business, and not all businesses are profitable.
1,000%. I've chosen to focus a lot in the expert industry, particularly working with coaches. And, coaches, we tend to get into this because we're, people, and we love being a part of other people's journey. And I know for me, I had a rude, shocking awakening when I was about 18 months into my business. I'd figured out how to acquire a client. I figured out how to sell. I figured out a lot of things. And so the money started flowing in, but I also wound up overextended financially. And I know I felt stupid. I felt like I should know better because my background was business before I went into entrepreneurship. But I very quickly learned that, business is more than bean counting. It's more than sales and acquisition. It's like all of the things playing together, right? In that sandbox. So I violently shoved into learning about profit and profit first and all of that. So what are you seeing right now today? I mean, this is such a timely interview. Just a couple of weeks ago, one of the biggest bookkeeping firms in the space closed very abruptly. They got acquired and then reopened really quickly. And I saw a lot of chatter on the feeds all about your bookkeeping, having your taxes prepared properly. I know when I was an entrepreneur in the earlier days, I was just like, this feels like a hassle. Can you talk to us a little bit about why people don't really think about the bookkeeping or the accounting in a proactive way, and it's very reactionary? That's what I saw on the feeds, was a lot of reaction to what happened there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people are so consumed with the client getting, right? So it's the acquisition, it's the sales, it's the conversion, right? Because, in this space, that's the big, big problem that most people have. But what's really interesting, one of those talents that coaches tend to have, I call them revenue generators. Like they're just really good at generating revenue. And you have to recognize when you're that person in that space, like, wow, I can generate revenue. But now, and I totally get it, right? You're so immersed in helping your people and making sure you're up leveling people and making sure they're getting what they need and what they want, that the finances, it's kind of like you think, oh, well, they'll take care of themselves because I have these two people in place. Hopefully you do, right? So that is really the first step. But then once you do that, they kind of sit in these two boxes siloed. And it doesn't come together, the financial picture fully. And then you have to start making decisions in the business. And the business owner starts shooting from the hip saying, well, I feel like, or I think, versus looking at data to drive those decisions. And all of those decisions can be made by looking at the data, but also having someone who can interpret it for you, give it to you in a way that you can understand it, because most business owners don't speak accounting speak. Right? You have to be able to speak from on a business owner to business owner level and have that conversation so that they can understand what it is that they need to do to make the right decisions in their business.
Totally. I remember actually being kind of freaked out. And it took me a bit of coaching to realize that I even had a terrible relationship with the word profit, because I had, come from a corporate environment and I had all this negative energy around that experience, and that I'm going to be free, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and all this kind of thing. And when I realized that, like, oh, profit's the problem, I was like, I felt like guilty, but I also felt really conflicted. I think a lot of coaches don't charge what they should be charging for their services, for example, or they're not recognizing the true cost of the strategy that they've chosen for client acquisition or their marketing and all of those kinds of things. And it's pretty easy to find yourself behind that 8 ball with the cash flying everywhere and not necessarily having a good idea of the picture. And I remember kind of getting slapped upside the head of realizing profit is just really kind of your savings in your business. And I had no energy around the word savings. I had all this energy around the word profit. So, like, what are some examples of things that you see when you're working with people?
Yeah, so those are some great points that you make. And when it comes to making these decisions and even raising your prices where people have that hesitation to do so, it's because we're coming from that place of it just doesn't feel right. But if you have someone that can actually show you, if you're spending $1 and getting 50 cents back, now you have a data-driven decision that actually makes you kind of upset. And so when you get to that point, then you're like, oh, now it makes sense why I can't stay at this level. I do have to charge at this level, or else I'm not even covering my costs. And to tell you the truth, to be in business, right, you want to be generating a profit. And it's important on so many levels. It's important for yourself. First of all, reward yourself for all the hard work and the hours and the time and the grind, right? Because us as business owners, right, it's just us a lot of times, and we have to be rewarded for the sacrifice, right? The sacrifice that we actually put in to be able to serve our clients on a high level. We absolutely use profits to reward ourselves in giving us the right level of pay for ourselves, but then also that extra money that we can actually use to do other things in our life, right? Which are maybe support your favorite causes, right? It doesn't have to be all about the corporate greed profits, right? Because I know some people have that connotation in their mind. It's not about that at all. It's being able to take your dollars and serve on a higher level and contribute to the areas in your life where you can make a bigger impact. So I think that's the bigger part of the story, and that if you can start stepping into that just makes you feel so much more.
That's so good. That's so good. So when you sit down with a client and you're looking at their P&L and the decisions you made, I've heard like the mistake of just like letting your feelings rule all of your decisions. I feel this, I feel that, and you're not backing up the feelings with data. What else do you see? Like, I'm just being nosy here. If you have like any examples of like what are some common things that that business owners and particularly coaches and experts tend to overlook that you help them to get on the right foot with?
Yeah. So one of the big things is that revenue solves all problems. Now, it can solve a lot of problems,
Yep.
right? But a lot of people think, all right, if I just bring in more revenue, it's going to right the ship on the finances. But this funny little thing happens is actually called Parkinson's law, right? It's got nothing to do with the disease, but Parkinson's law, right, is that we wind up consuming a resource to the level of its availability. So let's kind of look at the example. Just say you're bringing in $50,000 a month in your coaching business, right? Great business, right? But if $50,000 a month is going out, you don't have a profitable business, right? So if you think that, okay, if we get it to 75, it's going to solve everything. But once again, Parkinson's law creeps in and says, all right, now we've got more money, that's going up. But guess what? Now expenses tend to increase in tandem with the revenue, and it happens all of the time. And that's one of the biggest things that I see. So what's really cool, and it gives the business owner a lot of ease, right? It's like letting the air out of a balloon, where it's like, hey, listen, you don't have to, double or triple your revenue or do any crazy, gymnastics here, right? All we have to do is make sure we look at everything with a keen eye, with profits in mind. And I actually just put together a case study on this. I had someone who had a $50,000 business, and all we did was increase the revenue by about 16 or 17,000, and we turned our profit into a 50% profit in the business. So revenue is only a small piece of it, but that's where everybody goes first.
It's so true. It's so true. I actually found myself in this situation about a year and a half ago where I tricked myself into the psychology of I'll earn it back. Right? I'll earn it back. And I was in a period of like investment. I wanted to scale. I wanted to grow the business. And it took kind of that rude, abrupt moment of going like, oh my gosh, girl, you've got multiple months of losses that you're carrying here. And if you don't change the behaviors in the business, you won't have one. So we we fired our advertising agency. I let go of the strategy of having a sales team for the moment. And I say for the moment because a lot of these changes, they can be really painful, but you have to remember it's like this is the thing that you're doing for the moment for the longevity of the business. One of my favorite mentors, Tom Bilyeu, he says the CEO's job is to avoid a mortality event. And that's really where I felt like I was. But we slashed a huge amount of operating expenses. We changed from having multiple different CRM systems and automations all over the place and just sort of this tech splay. And we put it all into one streamlined system. I cut offers. I was just like, 2024 was a season of absolute slashing and burning. And it was also our most profitable year that we've had in a few years. And we didn't grow in magnitude, but the growth from doing that was just so tremendous that now in 2025, I'm much more optimistic about the future of the business.
Yeah. And that's great that you did that. These are kind of the problems that evolve. And really, in essence, these are pleasant problems to have because it means that you're growing and that you just need to grow into a new skill set. So it sounds like 2024 was your year to make sure that you looked at every single dollar going into the business, that it was working really hard, that you could get a maximum ROI on everything.
That was the whole idea. And I was freaked out at the time because I was like, well, what if I run out of hours in the day to be able to serve enough clients? Or what if? And I was living in the land of what if. So, I really had to work on that. When you're working with someone, what are the steps that you tend to take people through? I mean, I just shared what I did because I knew kind of what to do. But when you're working with someone, I'm sure if I was working with you, it probably would have gone a lot smoother, a lot faster. So what are your key main steps that you take people through?
Yeah. So, I mean, it really revolves around everything. What is it that the business owner wants and what's important at the time? Like, what's the number one problem that if we solve together would create the biggest impact? And for a lot of people, they say cash flow. Like, my money's up, my money's down, my money's up, my money's down. And so one of the big things that I do is I'll go in the background, I'll look at the numbers in the background because a lot of times business owners, they tell me I'm not a numbers person and I get overwhelmed. And so it's a matter of being able to make sure that you're working with the person on the level that they want to be engaging on the numbers, right? And what's nice about being in between of the accountant and the tax preparer is that I'm able to speak to the business owner from this level, right? From business owner to business owner, kind of translate all the accounting stuff into, something that if I was a fourth grader or a 10-year-old that, I could understand it, right? And I think that the accounting speak and all of that that level is up here, and it just, if you can kind of dial it down and make sure you're just looking at it through the lens of something, making it really, really simple. I mean, I could get into the complexities, but that's really what it comes down to, is synthesizing everything and just having a conversation with the business owner on what do you think that one thing that we can work on to solve that would really move everything else. And like I said, it's typically cash flow. And so you have to remember, tell you a little story here about what used to happen back in the day. Now, you can see that I've had a very, very long career. So now you know how old I am, or about how old I am. So I am going to tell you a story about back in the day. When I first started out in business, I actually partnered up with another gentleman, and we had a high net worth financial planning practice. And what was really interesting about what happened back then is that we didn't have the technology like today. So, using credit cards and having all of these subscriptions and things like that really wasn't the thing that we really spent our money on. But I'll kind of tell you how it worked. Business worked back then. This is probably late 80s, early 90s. And so in that business, we had an office manager. And here's how business ran back then, is that you would go ahead and have all of your money come into the business. So it all comes in to your operating account. You got to see your money, right? And yes, bills would come in, but they would come through snail mail, right? So you would get your bills in the mail. So you'd have all your bills. The office manager would take them. And then there was no credit cards, right? So you were working on a total cash basis, very different from now, right? And so checks would be written and have to be mailed out. And so where this story goes is that how the office manager operated is that they had the whole month where they would collect checks, deposit the checks, look at the money in the account, right? Yes, there was payroll, so there was always money for payroll. But what they did, the one key thing that they did, is that they had control over their expenses. So what do you think the office manager did? She took all of those bills from the month, she waited till the last day of the month, right? Wrote those checks, sent them out. How does that differ from today?
My gosh, it is chaos.
Chaos. So this is where business has changed and become complex. But if we use that story to just have the base of how a business can operate and really wrangle cash flow, the idea is hang on to your money for as long as possible. And there are so many ways to do that in this tech age where, there's people going in your pockets at all different times of the month. And that's what really screws up business owners. They can't put their finger on the pulse of where their money is or the inflows and outflows. So I use that story because it's a great example to say, hey, how do we kind of replicate that? How do we get back to that? Because that was total control and it worked, right?
Totally. One of the little I remember things in Mandaisms, just like little catchphrases. And the big one that came out of 2024 was, Amanda, never spend the same dollar or the same minute twice. And it's basically that principle of like, hey, like the reason we get into trouble is because it's a problem of organization. We're not organized to see that we've already committed that dollar, or we're already committed to the debt repayment of the dollars we spent previously, or whatever that is. So we accidentally spend 50 cents out of that dollar that was already spent. And now you've got like a real problem.
Yes.
But it's so hard to see that problem. And one of the key things that I actually did in 2024 is I changed banks so that I could have multiple different bank accounts and use more of an envelope system. And it's very similar to what the office manager in your story does is, now when we're, processing our compensation or payroll, or we're paying out our contractors or whatever it is that we're doing it using Parkinson's law, but taking rather than operating out of one big operating account, we're operating on a rhythm and a system of these smaller accounts so that we can have a point in time of the money and avoid spending the same dollar twice.
Which is fantastic, because not every dollar, like you said, that goes in the operating account is available to spend. You got to carve off your big areas. That's typically the owner's compensation. You got to pay yourself, right? Profits. And then you got to take care of the IRS. You got to keep the IRS happy.
Yep.
So carve that off. And then what's left is you make decisions on. And that is the profit first way. So good going, Amanda. Good going.
Awesome. Deborah, I'm so curious. Yeah, thank you. So, hey, you know what? That's what she said. She said that we rocked. So there you go. So good. Deborah, I love how you break things down so simply. I was thinking as you were telling the story of the office manager about how when I started my business, even though I'm very tech savvy, I've been using a computer since I was 3 years old, MS-DOS. So now whoever's listening to this can age date me. But I've been using computers and very proficient with computers for a really long time. But I found that overwhelm to be just insane. And so when I started my business, I actually was operating from a clipboard to manage my relationships and to make sure I was doing the appropriate follow through. So sometimes, taking a less technological view of things can actually help you resolve that overwhelm and that getting frozen by so many things flying around all at once. Yeah, I love that so
Yeah.
much.
Oh my gosh. I mean, respect on that because don't forget, it's how we learn too. And if you take the technology out of it and you get back to, tactile, right? So I always have this. I'm always taking notes on my
Yep.
client calls, even though I have my note taker. It's one of those things where you put pen to paper. It's kind of like, writing it on your brain. So you're learning it and absorbing it and it's becoming part of you. But technology has taken that piece out. And that is why we miss so many things, like you were saying, and people
Really.
spend a dollar twice. So that's a
Yeah.
great practice.
I love it. I love it. Deborah, I'm sure people want to follow you. What's the best way to do that?
Oh, great. They can find me over on LinkedIn. I'm very active over there on LinkedIn. So it's always great. And that's how we met. So always up for a message and for connecting.
Love it. Awesome. Well, listener, we'll make sure to have Deborah's information below so that you can reference that in the show notes. And Deborah really brought it today. So do make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another interview just like this one. And also leave us a review. 5 stars, please. Deborah worked really, really hard. But seriously, leave an honest review of the Amanda Kaufman Show so that other people can decide whether they're going to listen to us or something else when they're out for their daily walk. And we'll be back with another episode shortly. Thanks for joining us.